The Kreznar Imperium arrives at the edge of human space with a fleet so vast it blots out star systems on long-range scanners. 3,000 warships, each bristling with weapons that could glass a continent, arrange themselves in a formation that military analysts call the Reaper's Scythe. Admiral Vextor, whose collection of trophies includes the preserved neural clusters of 12 conquered species leaders, appears on every screen across human territory simultaneously, his translucent exoskeleton pulsing with bioluminescent rage. His ultimatum is simple: surrender or extinction. Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood frozen before the tactical display in Houston Command Center, her coffee forgotten in her hand as the alien transmission cut to static. Around her, the command center had fallen to a hush so profound she could hear the air circulation systems. "Those energy readings can't be right," whispered Technical Officer Patel beside her. "If they are." Sarah nodded mutely. If the readings were accurate, a single volley from the Kreznar fleet could obliterate Earth's orbital defenses. The Mars colonies wouldn't last an hour. The emergency alert system blared to life, shattering the silence. Red lighting bathed the command center as Admiral Keegan's voice came through, unnervingly calm. "All stations to Condition 1. This is not a drill." Outside the reinforced windows of the command center, the Houston skyline was already changing. Evacuation transports rose like startled birds from spaceports, the wealthy and connected making their escape to underground bunkers in the Rockies or submarine sanctuaries beneath the Pacific. Not that it would matter if the Kreznar deployed their planet killers. Sarah's comm unit buzzed with a priority message from her sister in New Chicago. "Is it true? Are we done for?" Before she could respond, the feeds from major cities worldwide began streaming to the command center's secondary monitors. Riots had erupted in sectors of New Delhi. Prayer circles formed in the streets of Lagos. In Moscow, citizens stood in eerie silence, watching the skies. The responses were as varied as humanity itself, but underpinning all of them was the same visceral fear. The kind of fear prey feels when the predator has finally cornered it. "Lieutenant Chen," barked Captain Rodriguez, "secure those civilian feeds and get me updated orbital defense postures. Now." Sarah snapped back to her training, fingers flying across her console. The civilian feeds disappeared, replaced by tactical assessments that only confirmed their worst fears. Earth's combined defense fleet, the pinnacle of human military achievement, consisted of just 115 warships, most of them designed for inter-colony security rather than full-scale warfare. Against 3,000 Kreznar vessels, they were less than insignificant. "They're giving us 48 hours to surrender," Rodriguez said, reviewing the translated ultimatum. After that, he didn't need to finish. Everyone knew what happened to species that defy the Kreznar. The Palaxians had been reduced to a cautionary footnote in xenoanthropology textbooks. The Drevi were now extinct save for a few specimens in Kreznar zoos. Sarah's console chimed with new orders. She was being recalled to the United Defense Council's secure facility. Priority Alpha. Her security clearance was being elevated on the spot. "Sir," she questioned, showing Rodriguez the orders. The captain's expression changed subtly. "Go. Now." Sarah grabbed her tablet and rushed toward the maglev tunnels that would take her to the UDC bunker. As the doors closed behind her, she caught a final glimpse of the tactical display. The massive Kreznar fleet holding position, confident in their overwhelming superiority. What she didn't yet know was that 16 kilometers beneath the Mariana Trench, in a bunker shielded from all known scanning technologies, 12 men and women of the United Defense Council were reviewing footage of the Kreznar fleet with expressions that didn't match the gravity of the situation. "So they finally took the bait," said Admiral Wai Lu, a thin smile crossing his weathered face. "Activate Operation Singular Response." Defense Minister Okafor's fingers danced across a biometric scanner. Authorization confirmed, deploying the Nemesis. And with that, humanity's desperate gamble began. On a Saturnian moon, inside a facility disguised as a failed mining operation, klaxons blare. The HSS Nemesis emerges from its artificial cavern, a vessel unlike anything humanity has publicly acknowledged building. While the rest of Earth's fleet consists of bulky, practical warships, the Nemesis resembles a predator, sleek, angular, and unsettlingly dark. Its hull absorbs light rather than reflecting it, composed of a lattice of materials that shouldn't coexist according to conventional physics. Chief Engineer Maya Okoro stood in the observation bay, watching as massive hydraulic arms retracted from the Nemesis's hull. 30 years of her life poured into what many had called an impossible project. She remembered the ridicule when she'd first proposed the dimensional folding theory at MIT. Her colleagues had laughed her out of academia. Now they worked under her, building something that defied their understanding of reality. Final systems check complete, announced her assistant, Raj. Quantum membrane stable at 99.7% efficiency. Maya nodded, her focus on the ship's unusual hull. Unlike conventional vessels with their metallic gleam, the Nemesis devoured light. The surface rippled occasionally like liquid, though it was solid to the touch, a visual manifestation of the dimensional barriers constantly forming and collapsing across its surface. "They're boarding now," Raj said, gesturing to a secondary monitor where personnel shuttles approached the Nemesis's hangar bay. The 157 crew members had trained together for years in virtual simulations, but they'd never served together on the actual vessel. There hadn't been time. The Nemesis had been scheduled for another 3 months of testing before deployment, but the Krasnar arrival had accelerated everything. Maya's comm unit pinged with a direct message from Captain Alina Reyes, Engineering Bay. 5 minutes. "She's early," Maya muttered, grabbing her tablet and heading for the connecting bridge. Alina Reyes was infamous for her unorthodox approaches to everything: tactics, protocol, even basic social interactions. The captain had been Maya's most persistent advocate during the project's darkest days when funding had nearly been cut. In the engineering bay, technically complex but aesthetically minimalist, Maya found Alina already waiting. The captain stood examining the dimensional core, a spherical chamber where conventional physics yielded to something else entirely. "Will it hold?" Alina asked without preamble, her dark eyes never leaving the pulsing core. "The simulations say yes," Maya replied. "Reality might disagree." Alina nodded, finally turning to face the engineer. A jagged mural scar traced from her left temple across her cheek, a souvenir from the Battle of Proxima Centauri, where she'd survived by stealing an alien shuttle and ramming it into the enemy command ship. "I've read the briefing files, but explain it to me like I'm 5, Alina said. "What exactly happens when they shoot at us?" Maya gestured to the dimensional core. "This creates microscopic tears in space-time around the ship. When energy weapons hit those tears, they're redirected into pocket dimensions. Conventional projectiles encounter variable mass fields that either stop them completely or reduce impact to negligible levels. And if they throw something we haven't anticipated." Maya's silence answered more clearly than words could have. Alina nodded, unperturbed by the implied risk. "Perfect is the enemy of good enough. We launch in 30 minutes. As Alina moved to leave, Maya caught her arm. "Captain, there's something you should know. The dimensional technology. We reverse-engineered it from the Proxima Centauri wreckage. But we've taken it far beyond what we found. If our theories are correct, the Nemesis isn't just a defensive platform. It's potentially the most devastating offensive weapon humanity has ever created." A slow smile spread across Alina's scared face. "That's precisely why I requested this command, Chief Engineer." She tapped her neural scar. "The Krasnar aren't the first visitors to underestimate us, but they might be the last." As the Nemesis powered up its experimental drive system, the very fabric of space around the Saturnian moon began to distort. The ship didn't so much launch as disappear from one point in space and reappear at another, the first practical implementation of quantum displacement technology. From the observation deck, a maintenance technician watched the ripple of displaced stars where the Nemesis had been. "God help the Kreznar," he whispered. "They have no idea what's coming." The Nemesis arrives at the designated diplomatic coordinates with a single quantum pulse that baffles the Kreznar sensors. No transition signature, no deceleration burn. It simply appears. Admiral Vextor's flagship, the Inevitable Dominion, looms like a metal mountain in space, surrounded by an honor guard of 200 vessels. When Kreznar officers get visual confirmation of humanity's fleet, ripples of what humans would recognize as laughter spread through their command centers. "Emergence complete," announced Lieutenant Diaz at the navigation console. "We're holding position 3,000 kilometers from the Kreznar flagship. On the Nemesis bridge, a hemisphere of adaptive displays and neural interface nodes rather than the traditional buttons and switches of conventional vessels." Captain Elena Reyes uncrossed her legs and stood. The bridge crew, handpicked from Earth's best and brightest, maintained the practiced calm of professionals who had drilled for this moment thousands of times. Only the subtle tremor in communications officer Miki's hand betrayed the tension they all felt. "Magnify the flagship," Elena ordered. The main display shifted, revealing the Inevitable Dominion in all its brutal majesty. The Kreznar dreadnought stretched nearly 20 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull studded with weapons emplacements and strange, organic-looking protrusions that intelligence suggested were sensory organs. Along its flanks, massive hangar bays disgorged swarms of fighter craft, a pointless show of force that reminded Elena of peacocks spreading their feathers. "They're scanning us," reported Defensive Systems Officer Nakamura. "Quantum membrane is absorbing their sensor probes as expected. They're getting exactly what we want them to see." Elena smiled. "And what's that?" "A conventional human warship with moderate shielding, fusion reactors, and standard armaments. Nothing special." Nakamura's eyes glinted with amusement. "Barely worth their attention." The communications array chimed. "Incoming transmission from the Kreznar flagship," Mbeki announced. "Visual and audio." "Put it through," Elena said, casually reaching for an apple from a small bowl mounted near her command chair. She took a deliberate bite as the screen shifted to show Admiral Vextor's command center. The Kreznar admiral's appearance was calculated to intimidate, his exoskeleton polished to a high sheen, neural trophies displayed prominently on his command harness. 4 pairs of compound eyes focused on Elena with predatory intensity. "Captain." Vextor's translator rendered his clicking speech into flat English. "You insult the Imperium by sending a single vessel. Where is your fleet? Where are your leaders?" Elena chewed thoughtfully, then swallowed before answering. "I'm authorized to speak for Earth. As for our fleet," she shrugged. "You're looking at it." A ripple passed through Vextor's exoskeleton, a sign of agitation or possibly amusement. "1 ship against 3,000. Your species' reputation for intelligence has been greatly exaggerated." "Let's skip the formalities," Elena replied, taking another bite of her apple. "You're here to conquer us. We're here to change your mind." Vextor's mandibles clicked rapidly, untranslated communication to his subordinates. On a secondary display, Tactical Officer Liu noted increased energy signatures from multiple Kreznar vessels. "They're powering weapons," Liu whispered. Elena nodded almost imperceptibly. She'd anticipated this. The Kreznar military doctrine was well documented. Demonstrate overwhelming force, then offer the enemy a chance to surrender before annihilation. It made conquering more efficient when species simply gave up after the demonstration. "Perhaps," Vextor said, his translator struggling to convey the menace in his tone, "you require a demonstration of the futility of resistance. A beam of concentrated energy, powerful enough to split a small moon, lanced from a support vessel toward the Nemesis." The bridge crew didn't flinch as it struck the ship dead center. For a moment, reality seemed to bend around the point of impact. The energy simply vanished, absorbed into one of Maya's microscopic dimensional rifts. No explosion, no damage. Not even a power fluctuation on the Nemesis systems. Elena took another bite of her apple, chewed thoughtfully, and said, "Interesting approach to diplomacy. Our turn." She gestured to Weapons Officer Santiago, who activated a targeted dimensional inverter, one of the Nemesis's less catastrophic offensive capabilities. A beam of distorted space no wider than a pencil connected briefly with the Krasnar vessel that had fired on them. A perfect spherical section, 10 meters in diameter, simply vanished from the alien ship's command tower, its matter displaced to a pocket dimension. The effect was surgical and precise, like someone had taken a cookie cutter to reality itself. On the display, Admiral Vextor's compound eyes widened in what might have been the first expression of fear he'd shown in decades. "Now," Elena said, discarding her apple core, "shall we begin actual negotiations?" The Nemesis's hull shimmers and begins to transform, sections folding and unfolding like origami made of darkness. Dr. Sanjay Mehta, a physicist whose theories were once considered too radical, even for peer review, stands on the bridge beside Elena. "The universe," he explains to a captured Krasnar diplomat as displays show the transformation, "is not what your scientists believe it to be." Diplomatic Officer Quamose escorted the Krasnar emissary onto the bridge, maintaining a respectful distance from the alien's clicking mandibles. Sub-Commander Thrixval had volunteered as a diplomatic observer after the demonstration of the Nemesis's capabilities, though everyone understood he was as much hostage as guest. "Your vessel defies comprehension," Thrixval said, compound eyes darting between displays showing the standoff between the Nemesis and the Krasnar fleet. "Our sensors cannot even determine what it's made of." Dr. Sanjay Mehta looked up from his workstation, eyes lighting with the gleam of a professor presented with an eager student. "That's because it exists simultaneously in multiple states," he said, rising to approach the alien. Captain Elena nodded her approval, giving Sanjay permission to reveal what had been Earth's most closely guarded scientific breakthrough. "May I?" Sanjay asked the Krasnar, gesturing toward a display panel. Thrixval's mandibles clicked in what the translation software interpreted as cautious assent. Sanjay's fingers danced across the console, bringing up a simulation of quantum particles behaving in ways that contradicted standard models. 20 years ago, I proposed that spacetime isn't the rigid framework your scientists believe, but rather a malleable medium that can be folded, stretched, and even punctured under specific conditions. "Heresy," Thrixval said automatically. "The Imperium Unified Physics Doctrine has established what your ancestors could understand." Sanjay interrupted gently. "But not what's possible." On the main view screen, the standoff continued. Admiral Vextor had recalled his vanguard to defensive positions around the flagship after the demonstration of the Nemesis' precision strike capability. Sensors showed energy weapons charged but holding fire. "They're planning something," Tactical Officer Liu warned. Elena nodded. "Of course they are. 3,000 ships don't retreat because one vessel can defend itself." She turned to Dr. Mehta. "I believe it's time for a more comprehensive demonstration." Sanjay hesitated. The quantum membrane defense system hasn't been field-tested against a coordinated attack of this magnitude. "Theory becomes practice today," Elena replied, her tone leaving no room for debate. She activated the ship-wide comm. "All hands, prepare for demonstration protocol Theta. Quantum membrane to full dispersion pattern." Throughout the ship, crew members secured equipment and engaged neural interfaces. In engineering, Chief Okoro's team monitored the dimensional core as it spooled up to unprecedented energy levels. On the bridge, Sanjay guided Thrixval to a secure observation station. "Watch carefully," he said. "Your people need to understand what you're facing." The Nemesis's hull began to transform, the matte black surface rippling like disturbed water. Sections folded inward while others extended outward, the entire geometry of the ship shifting in ways that made Thrixval's compound eyes unable to focus properly. "What's happening?" the Krasnar demanded, mandibles clicking rapidly in distress. "The ship is extending its quantum membrane," Sanjay explained, creating a field of micro-dimensional rifts throughout nearby space. On the tactical display, Admiral Vextor apparently reached a decision. Energy signatures spiked across the Kreznar fleet as weapons powered to maximum. Incoming Alpha Strike, announced Defensive Systems Officer Nakamura calmly. Multiple weapon types, converging trajectories. Alina settled into her command chair. Membrane status. Fully deployed, Sanjay confirmed. Dimensional rifts stable. The space around the Nemesis fractured in ways visible even to the naked eye, reality itself seeming to crack like glass as the Kreznar weapons fire struck the invisible defensive field. Energy beams, plasma bursts, and kinetic projectiles simply disappeared at the fracture points. Thrixval's translator failed to capture the sound he made, something between fear and awe. Those aren't shields in the conventional sense, Sanjay explained. The attacks aren't being blocked or absorbed. They're being redirected through dimensional rifts. As if to demonstrate his point, the same energy signatures that had disappeared began registering simultaneously at multiple points throughout the Kreznar formation, behind ships, between formations, inside supposedly secure command centers. No damage occurred, but sensor readings confirmed the truth. The Nemesis wasn't just defending itself, it was demonstrating that it could place that redirected energy anywhere. How? Thrixval asked, professional composure shattered. Our greatest scientists had advantages we lacked, Sanjay interrupted. Established knowledge, unified theories, access to other species research. He turned to face the alien directly. But we had an advantage you lacked, too. We were alone in the dark for so long, we had to imagine the impossible to reach the stars. Admiral Vextor, his reputation and position at stake, deploys 1/3 of his fleet in an attack formation, the Kreznar call, strangling the nebula. The human ship should be surrounded, cut off from escape, and subjected to concentrated fire from every angle. Instead, the battle becomes a mesmerizing spectacle that will later be studied in military academies across 12 systems. The Nemesis moves like no vessel its size should be able to. Acceleration curves that would liquefy organic pilots, turns that ignore inertia, momentary disappearances followed by reappearances in tactically impossible positions. They've committed 1,000 ships to the attack pattern. Tactical Officer Liu announced, her hands moving through the holographic interface, strangling the nebula formation, designed to eliminate any possible escape vector. A murmur ran through the bridge crew. Even with their technological advantage, those were overwhelming numbers. Captain Elena stood calmly, studying the three-dimensional tactical display. Conventional wisdom says we should retreat, find an exit vector. A slight smile played at the corners of her mouth. Let's move toward them instead. Mom. Navigational Officer Dias questioned, his expression betraying his shock. Full impulse toward the center of their formation, Elena confirmed. Weapons Officer Santiago, prepare targeted quantum disruptors, non-lethal configuration. Santiago nodded, fingers already programming the precise calibrations. Target priority. Weapons systems first, then propulsion. Leave life support untouched. Elena turned to Chief Engineer Okoro's station. Maya, I need everything the inertial dampeners can give us. We're going to dance. Maya's eyes widened. You can't possibly mean. The Proxima spiral. Elena confirmed, just like we discussed theoretically. That was a simulation with a safety factor off. We don't have time for caution. Elena cut her off. Can you do it? Maya held her captain's gaze for 3 heartbeats. Yes. But I'll need direct neural interface with the ship's gravitational systems. Elena nodded once. Do it. As the Nemesis accelerated toward the oncoming Kreznar formation, Maya connected her neural implant to a specialized interface. The ship's systems recognized her unique signature, granting her direct control over the experimental gravitational manipulation engines. What are they doing? Sub-Commander Thrixval asked, mandibles clicking rapidly as he watched the tactical display from his secured position. Dr. Sanjay Mehta shook his head in amazement, something that shouldn't be physically possible. The Nemesis shot forward, its quantum membrane fully extended, creating a visual effect like a comet with a tail of fractured reality. As the first wave of Kreznar ships opened fire, their energy weapons disappeared into the dimensional rifts surrounding the human vessel. Then the impossible happened. The Nemesis changed direction at a 90-degree angle without slowing. No turning radius, no gradual bank, a perfect right-angle turn that violated every principle of inertia and momentum conservation. On the bridge, warning indicators flashed as the inertial dampeners struggled to compensate. The crew felt a momentary sensation of pressure, but nothing like the crushing forces that should have killed them instantly. "Engineering status," Elena called out, her voice steady despite the strain evident on her face. Maya's response came through the neural interface, her physical voice silent as she maintained her concentration on the gravitational controls. "Localize space-time distortion holding. We can maintain this for 3 minutes before core temperature becomes critical." 3 minutes was all Elena needed. The Nemesis moved through the Kreznar formation like a needle through fabric, appearing in positions that left the alien tacticians scrambling to adjust. Each time the aliens recalculated firing solutions, the human ship was already somewhere else. With each pass, the Nemesis fired its quantum disruptors, not to destroy but to disable. Targeted systems on Kreznar vessels simply stopped functioning as the fundamental quantum properties of key components were temporarily altered. From a distant observation point, the battle resembled a dance of fireflies. The dark shape of the Nemesis weaving between the larger Kreznar vessels, flashes of energy disappearing into dimensional rifts, precision strikes leaving alien ships adrift but intact. "Why aren't they destroying us?" Fricks Val asked, genuine confusion evident in his translator's tone. "They have the capability." Before Sanjay could answer, Elena's voice cut through the command channel that the Kreznar could hear. "Your ancestors understood something you've forgotten, Admiral. The most dangerous predators don't need to be the largest." The Nemesis slipped between two dreadnoughts, a precisely calibrated dimensional pulse, momentarily linking the molecular structure of their hulls. When the pulse ended, the ships remained physically connected, melded together at the atomic level in specific areas. Throughout the Kreznar formation, confusion reigned. Vessels that should have been destroyed were merely disabled. A single human ship was outmaneuvering an entire fleet, and most bewildering of all, the humans were showing restraint. In the Kreznar military doctrine, there was no concept more foreign, more incomprehensible, than an enemy with superior firepower choosing not to use it. The battle reaches a turning point when the Nemesis appears to falter, weapons powering down, movement becoming predictable. Kreznar tacticians recognize a ship straining beyond its capabilities and order concentrated fire on the suddenly vulnerable vessel. It's a trap. The Nemesis's core activates its true power, the consciousness integration network. Inside the ship, the crew link with each other and the ship's AI in a temporary hive mind, unlike anything the galaxy has seen. Neural pathways that evolved on the savannas of Africa to track prey, calculate trajectories, and anticipate threats now merge with artificial intelligence designed to manage complex systems. Gravitational systems offline, Maya reported through clenched teeth, her neural interface disconnecting as safety protocols engage. Core temperature exceeding tolerances. Alarms blared across the bridge as the Nemesis's erratic movements suddenly stabilized. The ship drifted in a predictable trajectory, its quantum membrane fluctuating visibly. Multiple systems failing. Lieutenant Diaz called out, "We've lost 60% of our maneuverability." On the tactical display, the remaining Kreznar vessels quickly adjusted their formation, recognizing the sudden vulnerability. Admiral Vextor's voice came through the communications array, a note of triumph evident despite the translator's flat delivery. "Your ship has impressive capabilities, Captain, but it's clearly unstable. Surrender now, and I will spare your crew." Elena exchanged a glance with Dr. Mehta, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. She opened a private channel to her senior officers. "Prepare for CIN activation. Level 4 integration. On their neural implant readouts, 5 red confirmation signals turned green. The officers understood. This was no longer a demonstration. This was the deployment of humanity's final technological frontier, the one advancement they had kept hidden even from Thrixfall. Sub-Commander, Elena addressed the Kreznar observer. You might want to secure yourself. The alien's compound eyes focused on her. You've lost, Captain. Your ship is failing. Is it? She replied, with the first genuine smile since the battle began. Or perhaps we're just beginning. Elena pressed her palm against a biometric scanner at her command station. Activate Consciousness Integration Network. Authorization raise Alpha Tango 79. Throughout the ship, neural interface nodes activated simultaneously. The 157 crew members felt the momentary disorientation as their consciousness expanded beyond individual bodies. They remained themselves. Elena was still Elena, Maya still Maya. But they also became something more, something greater than the sum of its parts. The ship's artificial intelligence, previously operating as a sophisticated but separate system, joined the network. Not as master or servant, but as partner. Human intuition merged with machine precision. Emotional intelligence coupled with computational power. From the outside, the transformation was subtle at first. The fluctuations in the quantum membrane stabilized. The ship's drift halted, then reversed with a precision that seemed impossible for a vessel apparently on the verge of system failure. Thrixfall watched in growing confusion as status indicators throughout the bridge changed from critical red to optimal green without any physical intervention from the crew. The officers sat motionless at their stations, eyes open but unfocused, neural interfaces glowing with soft blue light. What is happening? He demanded, but received no answer. The humans appeared conscious yet completely unresponsive to external stimuli. On the main display, Admiral Vextor's fleet committed to their attack run, concentrating fire on what they perceived as a crippled vessel. Energy weapons and kinetic projectiles converged on the Nemesis, only to be intercepted by precisely placed dimensional rifts that hadn't existed seconds before. The Nemesis transformed again, but unlike the previous physical reconfiguration, this change seemed almost organic. The hull morphed into something that barely registered as technology to Kreznar sensors. Tendrils of dark energy extended outward, reaching toward the approaching vessels. Where these tendrils made contact, Kreznar technology simply stopped functioning, not damaged or destroyed, but systematically shut down, as if the fundamental principles that allowed their technology to function had been locally rewritten. Ship after ship went dark, drifting helplessly. No destruction, no casualties, just the methodical, inexorable neutralization of the greatest armada the Kreznar had ever assembled. Admiral Vextor, watching his invincible fleet being systematically disabled from his command center, gave an order unprecedented in his military career. Retreat. All vessels. Emergency FTL jump. But the Nemesis had anticipated this. Gravity anchors, localized space-time distortions that prevented faster-than-light travel, deployed throughout the battlefield, trapping the Kreznar fleet in normal space. For the first time in his long, blood-soaked career, the Admiral experienced an unfamiliar emotion. Fear. On the Nemesis's bridge, Elena stood amid her neural-linked crew, her eyes illuminated by the interface, simultaneously present in hundreds of locations throughout the battle. The Consciousness Integration Network allowed her to perceive and direct the conflict from multiple perspectives simultaneously. She broadcast across all frequencies, her voice unnaturally harmonized as the entire crew spoke through her. You came with 3,000 ships to our home. We brought one to yours. Consider what that means about us. With the Kreznar fleet trapped and systematically being disabled, Elena surprises everyone. She orders the Nemesis to stand down and reactivates diplomatic channels. We could continue until none of your ships function. She tells Vextor, but unlike you, we don't measure victory in body counts. The Consciousness Integration Network gradually powered down, leaving the Nemesis's crew momentarily disoriented as their perceptions contracted from the vastness of the collective back to individual awareness. Captain Alina blinked several times, the neural interface glow fading from her eyes as she steadied herself against her command chair. "Status report," she requested, her voice hoarse. 1,427 Kreznar vessels disabled. Tactical Officer Liu reported. "The remaining ships are contained within our gravity anchor field. No FTL escape possible." Elena nodded, then turned to Communications Officer Miki. "Open a channel to Admiral Vextor. Priority diplomatic frequency." "Are you certain, Captain?" Mbiki asked, surprise evident in his voice. "We have them completely at our mercy." "That's precisely why," Elena replied. "Mercy is only meaningful when you have power." The main display flickered, then resolved to show Admiral Vextor's command center. Unlike the pristine order of their first communication, chaos reigned in the background. Kreznar officers rushed between stations, mandibles clicking in panic as systems continued to fail throughout their fleet. Vextor himself remained outwardly composed, though the subtle vibration in his exoskeleton betrayed his agitation. "Have you contacted me to dictate terms of surrender, Captain?" he asked, his translator failing to hide the bitterness in his tone. "No, Admiral," Elena replied, straightening her uniform. "I'm contacting you to end this conflict before it goes any further." Confusion rippled through Vextor's compound eyes. "You have disabled half my fleet. The rest are trapped. By all tactical measures, you have won." "This isn't about winning," Elena said. "It's about finding a path forward that doesn't involve more suffering." She gestured to Lieutenant Diaz, who transmitted a data package to the Kreznar flagship. "These are our proposed terms. The Kreznar Imperium will withdraw from human space and recognize the sovereignty of all human-settled worlds. In return, we will release your fleet and establish diplomatic relations." Vextor's translator struggled to interpret his response, something between disbelief and suspicion. "You would simply let us leave after we came to conquer your species, with conditions," Elena clarified. "Non-aggression treaties, monitored borders, established diplomatic protocols." A senior Kreznar officer approached Vextor, clicking urgently in their native language. The Admiral's attention shifted momentarily as he absorbed whatever report was being delivered. "You've disabled our vessels without destroying them," Vextor observed, turning back to the communication. "Our casualties are minimal. Why show such restraint when you clearly possess the capability to annihilate us?" Elena's expression softened slightly. "Because that's not who we are, Admiral. Humanity has spent millennia fighting our own wars, learning the cost of victory at any price. We built the Nemesis hoping we'd never need to use it. And when we did, we designed it to preserve life whenever possible." On the Nemesis bridge, Sub-Commander Thrixval watched the exchange with mandibles trembling in what the translator interpreted as profound confusion. "You could demand anything," he whispered to Dr. Mehta. "Territorial concessions, technology transfer, reparations. There are things more valuable than territory or technology," Sanjay replied quietly. Elena continued addressing Vextor. "We're also prepared to offer something no one has offered the Kreznar Imperium before, partnership rather than subjugation." She nodded to Officer Miki, who transmitted a second data package. "These are technological specifications for advanced medical applications, sustainable energy systems, and faster-than-light communication networks that would benefit your civilian populations. Not weapons, not the dimensional physics that power the Nemesis, but innovations that could improve the lives of your people." Vextor's compound eyes focused intently on his own display as the data scrolled before him. For the first time, his posture changed, the rigid military bearing giving way to something like uncertainty. "The Imperium Council will need to review these terms," he said finally. "I am not authorized to accept such an unconventional resolution." Elena nodded. "Of course, we'll maintain current positions while you consult with your leadership." As Vextor moved to end the transmission, Elena added one final point. "Admiral, you should know something before you speak with the Council." Her voice dropped slightly, meant for his ears alone. "The Nemesis is a prototype. It contains 1/7 of the theoretical applications we've developed. The restraint you witnessed today came from our ethical choices, not our technological limitations." The Admiral's translator remained silent for several seconds before rendering his response. "I will convey your message, Captain." After the transmission ended, Elena turned to find her bridge crew watching her, with expressions ranging from pride to disbelief. "Do you think they'll accept?" Lieutenant Diaz asked. Elena glanced at Thrixval, noting how the Kresner diplomat's posture had changed throughout the battle, from arrogant confidence to stunned respect. "They will," she said with quiet certainty. Not out of fear of the Nemesis, but fear of what other single ships humanity might deploy next, and perhaps, just perhaps, out of curiosity about a species that values mercy as much as strength. 6 months after what the galaxy now calls the one-ship battle, a Kresnar cultural exchange delegation arrives on Earth. They expect to find a militaristic society obsessed with the technology that created the Nemesis. Instead, they encounter a bewildering diversity of human cultures, most citizens seemingly unconcerned with interstellar politics. The Singapore Gardens shimmered under evening lights, the ancient botanical sanctuary, now incorporating alien flora alongside Earth's native species. Ambassador Vextor, formerly Admiral, now the Imperium's first true diplomatic representative to humanity, moved carefully along the elevated walkway, his exoskeleton adorned with the blue sashes of peace rather than the red harness of war. "You find our gardens pleasant?" Elena asked, walking beside him in formal diplomatic attire rather than her captain's uniform. "Chaotic," Vextor admitted, compound eyes scanning the seemingly random arrangement of plants. "Yet harmonious in that chaos. Much like your species." Elena smiled. In the 6 months since the treaty signing, the former admiral had proven surprisingly adaptable to his new role. The Kresnar were nothing if not pragmatic. When faced with evidence that their military doctrine had failed, they pivoted rather than persisted. Tomorrow's symposium agenda includes presentations on dimensional physics, Elena noted. "Dr. Mehta is looking forward to working with your scientists." Vextor's mandibles clicked in what Elena had come to recognize as amusement. "They remain deeply unsettled by your discoveries. The unified physics doctrine has been foundational to Kresnar science for 8 generations. Paradigm shifts are never comfortable," Elena agreed. They reached a viewing platform overlooking the city skyline, where anti-gravity transports moved between buildings illuminated against the twilight sky. Below, humans and a handful of visiting Kresnar mingled in public squares and markets. "There is something I cannot understand," Vextor said after a contemplative silence. "We have observed your society closely these past months. Your species possesses technology that could have made you the dominant force in the sector. The Nemesis alone could have conquered our homeworld. Yet, instead of building a fleet of such vessels, you're adapting the technology for exploration." He gestured toward the distant spaceport where the Nemesis was being refitted, its distinctive silhouette visible even at this distance. Additional decks had been added, offensive systems replaced with scientific equipment. "We could have built a fleet," Elena acknowledged. "But weapons are the tools of those who can imagine no other solution." Vextor's translator hesitated over his reply, struggling to convey nuance. "The Imperium Council still debates whether your restraint demonstrates wisdom or weakness. Some argue we should prepare for eventual conflict despite the treaty. Others believe your species represents something new in our experience." Before Elena could respond, a commotion drew their attention. A group of schoolchildren on a field trip had noticed the Kresnar ambassador and approached with curious excitement rather than fear. Their teacher tried to herd them away, but Elena waved them forward. "Ambassador Vextor," she said, "perhaps you would answer some questions. These students have been studying interspecies relations." The Kresnar diplomat froze momentarily, In his culture, young were kept segregated from important matters until maturity. But he adjusted quickly. I would be honored. A 12-year-old girl with braided hair stepped forward without hesitation. Sir, my history teacher says humans spent thousands of years fighting each other before we reached the stars. Is that why your people thought we'd be easy to conquer? The directness of the question caused Vextor's mandibles to click rapidly in surprise. An insightful observation, young human. Yes, species that war among themselves are typically vulnerable to external forces. The girl nodded thoughtfully. But my teacher also says that's why we built ships like the Nemesis, hoping we'd never need to use them, because we already knew what war cost. Vextor turned to Elena, compound eyes expressing what might have been respect. From the mouths of the young, clarity emerges. As the children continued their questions, Elena watched the interaction with quiet satisfaction. The galaxy was changing, perspectives shifting, possibilities emerging that neither humans nor Kreznar had imagined 6 months ago. Later that evening, as they concluded their diplomatic walk, Vextor paused before returning to the Kreznar embassy. The refit of the Nemesis, it truly is for exploration beyond known space, he asked. Elena nodded. With a crew that includes Kreznar scientists alongside humans, there are mysteries beyond our borders that will take both our species' perspectives to understand. And the other vessels like it that you implied existed. A smile touched Elena's lips. The universe is vast, Ambassador, and humanity prefers friends to enemies. But we're prepared for either. As the Nemesis prepared for its maiden voyage as an exploration vessel 3 days later, Admiral Wideliu stood with Elena on the observation deck of Lunar Station Alpha. Below them, Earth rotated serene and blue. The Imperium has withdrawn from 4 other contested systems since the treaty, Wei noted. Your gamble paid off, Captain. Elena watched as the modified Nemesis powered up its dimensional drive, preparing to venture into uncharted space with its mixed human Kreznar crew. It wasn't a gamble, she replied. Humanity's greatest strength has never been our technology or our weapons. No, Elena said as the Nemesis disappeared in a quantum pulse, bound for the unknown. It's our capacity to imagine better possibilities and then make them real.